Mr. Dean?
Here.
Mr. Sharp? Mr. Thompson? Mr. Gould? Mr. Tanner?
Here.
Mr. Groby?
Here.
Mr. Faulkner?
Here.
Mr. Canulet? Mr. Belisario?
Here.
Miss O'Brien?
Here.
Mr. Stefanczyk?
Here.
Mr. Bender? Mr. Artigue?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, in keeping then with our tradition, we will begin the meeting by the invocation and pledge of allegiance. The invocation will be given by the Honorable Councilman Sharp, and the pledge will be led by the Honorable Gene Belisario.
Bow with me, please. Our gracious, divine, and loving Holy Father, we humbly come before you this evening to ask your blessings on our efforts here tonight. Give us your wisdom to know what is the right thing to do. Give us your strength to make it so. And in all things, as in this as in all things, we will give you the honor and the glory, and we ask it in the name of your loving Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, I heard at least one play ball. I'm going to say go Tigers. Okay. The first item on this, the second special council meeting, is an announcement of public hearing to set millage rates for 2014. And in keeping with the legislation, I'm going to read this notice. Notice is hereby given pursuant to Article 7. Dennis, I think you stirred God up there for a second. Notice is hereby given pursuant to Article 7, Section 23C of the Louisiana Constitution and Revised Statute 47-1705B that a public hearing of the St. Tammany Parish Council will be held at the regular meeting place, St. Tammany Parish Council Chambers, 21490 Coop Drive, Mandeville, Louisiana, on Thursday, August 7th, 2014 at 6 p.m. to consider levying additional or increased millage rates without further voter approval or adopting the adjusted millage rate and rolling forward to the millage rate not to exceed the prior year's maximum. The estimated amount of tax revenues to be collected at the next tax year from the increased millage is $34,787,691, and the amount of increase in taxes attributable to the millage increase is $3,975,278. With that order of business then being taken care of, I'll move down to an ordinance for introduction. Ordinance calendar number 5220, ordinance to amend the parish code to make changes to provisions of the issuance of special events permits. Mr. Stefanczyk.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this ordinance came about because of people who were holding special events at their homes and stuff. All of a sudden, the amount of paperwork, whether it's church or homes or whatever it was, the amount of paperwork that we needed to provide became, I would say, almost insurmountable. Not quite, but because they were still able to hold the event. But we've changed the ordinance to reduce that down quite a bit. And except that I want to add one modification to this ordinance before we introduce it. Under item, after item 6 on the second page, and I'll have this in final form when we get here next month. But it'll be item number 7. A special event occurring on parish property must also comply with any requirements applicable to the use of parish property, in addition to those provisions for the sale or inclusion of alcoholic beverages at the special event. With that, I would like to move to introduce. I'd like to amend this first before the introduction.
I'll second the amendment.
All right, there's a motion then to amend by Mr. Stefanczyk and a second by Mr. Belisario. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Anything from the administration? Would anyone from the public like to address this amendment? None appearing then, please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
I would like to introduce as amended.
All right, a motion has been made to introduce by Mr. Stefanczyk, seconded by Mr. Bellisario. Very well, then. That will take care of our introduction. Then moving down to appointments, item number 1, resolution to appoint 1 member to replace Brian Moore, resigned, to the St. Tammany Rec District number 4. Mr. Stefanczyk.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to nominate Dan Ferrari to replace Brian Moore.
All right, there's been a nomination of Dan Ferrari and second by Mr. Groby. Are there any other nominations for this position? This being a district appointment, we can go ahead and approve it tonight,
Yes.
correct? All right, then are there any further discussions on this? Well, let's first declare the nominations closed.
Move.
Motion by Mr. Stefanczyk, seconded by Mr. Artigue. Please vote on closing the nominations.
Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
All right, now we'll vote on the appointment of Mr. Dan Ferrari to replace Brian Moore. Motion by Mr. Stefanczyk has been made, by Mr. Groby is on the floor. Are there any comments from the administration? Anyone in the public wish to offer comments? None appearing, then please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
All right, that concludes then the agenda for the second special council meeting. I'll take a motion to adjourn this meeting. Motion by Mr. Stefanczyk, seconded by Ms. O'Brien. Let's vote on closing this meeting. Please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 4 absent.
And now we've got, I tried to stretch that out as far as I could stretch it. So let's stand by for another 20 minutes and we'll move to the first special council meeting. Thank you for your forbearance. All right, if I can ask everyone to take their positions, we will begin this, the official special, the first, it's not identified such, but the special council meeting for tonight's St. Tammany Parish Council. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Dean? Here. Mr. Sharp? Here. Mr. Thompson? Mr. Gould? Mr. Tanner? Here. Mr. Groby? Here. Mr. Faulkner? Here. Mr. Canulet? Mr. Bellisario? Here. Ms. O'Brien? Here. Mr. Stefanczyk? Here. Mr. Bender? Here. Mr. Artigue? Present. Mr. Smith? Hello. You have a quorum.
All right, having previously invoked the blessing of Almighty God, we will dispense with the invocation and pledge of allegiance and move directly to the ordinance for introduction. Ordinance for introduction number 1, ordinance calendar number 5219, ordinance to amend the Parish Code, Chapter 7, Drainage and Flood Control, Article 7, to enact Section 7-090, creating the St. Tammany Parish Sub-Drainage District Number 5 of Gravity Drainage District Number 5. Does anyone wish to address this item? Get a motion on the floor? All right, there's a motion by Mr. Bellisario, seconded by Mr. Artigue. Is there any discussion on this item? All right, anything from the staff? Okay, then it's that's all we'll need to do then. We've got an motion and a second for introduction. That then will allow us to move to the ordinance for adoption. Item number 1, ordinance calendar number 5218, ordinance authorizing the Parish of St. Tammany through the office of the Parish President to purchase 296 acres comprising the former Southeast Louisiana Hospital site from the state of Louisiana, Ward 4, District 7.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Tanner, seconded by Mr. Stefanczyk. Is there any discussion on this item?
I have a question,
Mr.
Mr.
Bender.
Chairman. I wanted to see if Ms. Pat, you remember how you had given me a brief update about your first meeting regarding the hospital
The first meeting?
with Dr. Preston and
Oh, yes,
Dr.
yes,
Mann.
yes,
Do you-
yes.
Do you think that would be this would be good to give us a little update?
I'd love to.
Yeah,
If that's okay
sure.
with Mr. Chairman. As many of you know, we have, our behavioral health issue in St. Tammany Parish is quite dire. We have always wanted to work with the coroner's office to help us find the solutions that we need for our problem here in St. Tammany. So we had our first meeting with Dr. Preston at his request. Just he requested this meeting. I would meet with him anytime, and it was specific to mental health in St. Tammany Parish. And what we ask him is be our partner. We need your help. We need funding, obviously, and we need programs. I was so encouraged by the time we left that meeting. He was, the new term is all in. So was his mental health director, Dr. Manga. They were very, very excited about some programs that we have ongoing and that they want to participate in. And they even came up with an additional one that really has something to do with the purchase of this property. And that they recognize that one of the problems is oftentimes someone that threatens suicide may be just under the influence of alcohol or drugs. And after you get through that period, it's not as serious as someone that has been thinking about it or trying it before. So not to place a value on either one of those, but there's a difference. So what happens now with everybody's treated the same. That person that may be under the influence will either go to the hospital, to the emergency room, or sometimes to jail. But neither of those is a perfect solution, because in the hospital emergency rooms they may not be, well, they will not start treating them right away. It takes some time to go through this process. And in the jail, that's not where they belong. They have an issue. So Dr. Manga and Dr. Preston said, we would love to talk with you about a part of that hospital, Southeast Hospital, if you are able to purchase it, maybe having a section, I don't know, 15-bed section, that when we do have these cases that come in, alcohol or drug related, that we can take them there instead of going to jail or to the emergency room. There are two advantages to that, or more than two, but these are the main two. First of all, they don't go to the emergency room and take up the space of a hospital. And secondly, they start treating them immediately. They don't have to wait the 72 hours that they normally do and don't get the treatment right away. So I guess it was a long meeting. A lot of good things came from it, but I was so excited about the coroner being involved just really involved, coming up with some new ideas. And Dr. Manga, I have to say, he said, I am so energized now. It's just like a new beginning. So I am really, really happy about that meeting and about the results of it. And I think we've got a lot of good things to look forward to if we can get this done. Thank you. Thank you for asking about that.
All right, is there any further discussion items among my colleagues? Anything from the administration? I have one comment card that's been submitted by the public. Ms. Slifer, would you step up to the microphone? You might want to repeat your name just in case. We've got your address.
Thank you. Sandra Slifer, League of Women Voters. Thank you, Chairman Falconer. I just have questions regarding the that in the ordinance it says that there will be 3 different uses for this property, and I'm curious as to whether this property, I understand that the parish is buying it. There's a time element to this to get this done quickly. I'm curious to know if Recreation District Number 1 will be purchasing any of this property from the parish, or if this will be given to the to them. And the same thing, with The mitigation bank, will this be something that is maintained by the parish, or is this property, does the parish plan to, first of all, sell any of the property to anyone else? And then the second question had to do with the zoning of this property, that what is it zoned now, and will the zoning change once this transaction takes place, or any, subsequent transactions that are in the works because of this emergency ordinance that y'all are considering?
Thank you, Ms. Slifer. Madam President, do you wish to address these questions?
I
at this
would like
time?
to
Please
address
do.
them. I'm going to try to remember them, so if you'll wait there and remind me if I don't. First of all, the three different uses. Obviously, the mental health hospital will be the major one. We want to make sure that we keep that hospital open for that purpose. Secondly, Recreation District 1.
Right.
Wants to expand. They are overcrowded. So there's some property there that they may be interested in purchasing, or so they can expand their fields. The third, well, there's four actually.
Four.
But there are
The
four.
road, and, right,
Third
exactly.
is the connecting highway between 1088 and 190, which is sorely needed, and that property will be used. We have to have that property to do that. And the fourth one will be any other property that we don't use for the hospital, recreation, or the road will go into our mitigation bank, which will be added to the property that we already have, enlarging our mitigation bank, that we will the parish will use that mitigation bank for our projects. Okay, we will not go out on the open market and have to purchase credits anymore. We will own our own.
And that this will be for the projects that the parish undertakes.
That's correct.
So for instance, the roadway that is adjacent to this property, would be a possibility.
Every
Right.
project that we do, just like every other project in the parish almost, there's a wetlands issue.
Right,
So
right.
we have to buy those credits on the open market just like everyone else. This allows us to use our own credits without, we'd just buy them from ourselves, which would be no transaction. So, okay?
And do you have any idea, I'll address to Chairman
The next question was
Felkner.
the zoning issue.
It's MD1, tell me the zoning.
The actual hospital facility is an MD district for hospitals. The remainder of the property, a majority of it is PF2, Public Facilities District, which is the same district as the state management areas, conservation areas of mitigation banks. So potentially anything purchased by the rec district would have to be adjusted
For
to
their
allow
use.
the active recreation, but otherwise the zoning would remain the same.
And we intend for the zoning, that's the whole reason we're purchasing it, is to keep that hospital operating as it is now. Okay, did
and-
I answer everything?
Yes, you did. I just have one follow-up question, if I may, that I'm just curious as to, is there any, do you have an idea of the number of acres that the Recreation District might be looking at?
No, their board will determine that. It's over 100, I believe, but their board will determine that. And, we want to make sure that we have things in place that they can buy what they need, and the rest of the uses will be available too.
Very good. Thank you, Chairman Felkner. Thank you,
Thank you. Very good
Mrs.
questions.
President.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, then that's the last public comment that I have. We have a motion and a second on the floor. I can't recall who made it, but I'm sure our clerk has got it in place, so please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 3 absent.
All right, now we will, I'll need a motion to go to recess for a period of time to permit the Fire District Board to conduct their public hearing on the property tax issue.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Stefanczyk, seconded by Mr. Smith to go to recess. All, please vote.
Motion is unanimous, 3 absent.
All right, we'll stand in recess while the Fire District Board then conducts their hearing.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
All right, please vote on coming out of recess. Need one more vote to come out of recess.
No, I got 'em.
Who are we missing?
I got them all. Motion is unanimous, 5 absent.
All right, we are now back in session as the Parish Council. I want to just point out that the reason now that the next public hearing will take place under the auspices of the council is because the call for the tax is actually the Parish of St. Tammany, where the call for the tax for the fire district is the actual fire district board. So that's the distinction for the public. Also, there was a question raised in that last public hearing about where the information could be found for tax millages, and our public information officer informed me at the recess that if you go to stpgov/taxes, you'll see a breakdown pie chart illustrated there on the website. Now, I presume we'll just go to the director of the library system, Mr. Donald Westmoreland, for a presentation.
We have some.
I have copies of the presentation for all of you. I also have some that are just stapled together, so I should have enough for everyone up here, but if not, I'd like to distribute these to the audience, so if you let me know if we're short any. Is anyone up here who does not have one? I have some here. Anyone else in the front who does not have one?
Welcome, Mr. Westmoreland.
Thank you, sir. Tonight's presentation we have before you is just sort of a recap of what we do and our history on the first page. Currently, by law, we could potentially collect 6.29 mills. For the previous many years, we've been at 5.35 mills. Just some basic questions that people have, and people still are using the library. We had over 1,057,000 visits last year, and we circulated over 1,223,000 items. All our branches, wherever they are, big or small, are constantly in use. If you turn to page 2, it sort of recaps what I just said. In addition to that, we had over 1,785 programs. We answered 95,000 reference questions, and we had 181,000 people sitting at our public access computers last year. So it's quite enormous. Anyway, on page 3, I'm going to kind of read through this. During the previous millage cycle, which ended in 2009, the library received 6.33 mills. In October of 2007, 2 years prior to the expiration of that millage, the citizens of St. Tammany voted to renew that library millage at the previous rate of 6.33 for 15 years, commencing in 2010 and continuing into 2024. In additional language was included in that millage vote wording to allow for a portion of that millage to be used for capital projects. In 2008 was a reassessment year. The millage was collected at that time during the previous millage was 6.33. Because the library was collecting the maximum amount allowed, we were not automatically adjusted downward. The Parish Council suggested that the Library Board agreed to roll back as not to unduly benefit from these rise in assessments, especially during a time when it was a difficult time for the parish recovering from Katrina. And our board agreed to do that, and we rolled back to 5.38, which y'all ratified. In January 2010, when the current millage began to be collected, instead of getting the 6.33 at that time that was voted on, we continued to collect at the 5.38 mill level, the amount of money received under the previous millage. In 2012 was a reassessment year. And due to the fact the library was not taking the maximum allowable millage of 6.33, we were automatically rolled back from 5.38 to 5.35 as not to unduly benefit from the change in value. As we were not taking the maximum millage allowed, the maximum was adjusted down to 6.29. Other reassessments is scheduled for 2016 unless the legislative auditor calls for it. By not receiving the maximum millage for 4 years, since the millage was renewed, the library has not collected about $6.5 million that we potentially could have. We use the money we currently receive for maintenance and operations of the library, and any money we have saved has been set aside for projects such as which we're doing in Slidell, replacing the HVAC system and doing some other modernizations of that, including the light renovation. Was actually a cave in there, and then we have money for operational reserves and emergencies. Anyway, if you turn to the next page, well, we usually based our projections on all those subtractions that you heard from the police chief, from the fire chief that are deducted, and the $9,181,000 that we were projecting this year, is based on what we would think we would net out of that what we could have potentially get. I know, just as the fire chief said, the homestead exemption and all those other deductions for pensions and such. Operational expenditures are about $9,180,000, basically a balanced budget. And to pay for the Slidell HVAC system, we're funding that by savings, which our board set aside $1.1 million of our fund balance coming into this year for that project. As of December 31st, we had, of 2013, we had $5,390,459 in cash in hand coming into January 1st. We do rely on that money when we come into the beginning of the year, when we wait on our revenue receipts, and the assessor did a wonderful job because we got it faster than I think we ever got it before. But it's not been uncommon for us to have to fund ourselves for 2 or 3 months. And the good thing about having this reserve is that we don't have to borrow money to do that. We also have to keep in mind that on our insurances, we have enormous deductibles. So if we were to lose a building or whatever, that we'd have to be willing to deal with that. And then part of the savings, that I alluded to, our board dedicated $1.1 million for the renovations at Slidell. We still have $50,000 we're holding for the Madisonville branch art that's dedicated to that purpose, and that has to be decided. So there's, about $300,000 that's not spoke for in our savings. If we are able to get the 0.94 mils that we're not collecting, our board would like to dedicate that money specifically for capital projects, big capital projects that we need, that just go out of the normal realm of what our budget can handle. And we do have capital parts in our budget, but it's very small relative to a $1 million project such as we had at Slidell. Most of our facilities are 20 to 40 years old, and we have rented 2 facilities for the past 15 years. And we have listed in this document some of the projects that we are interested in doing. If we were able to capture that 0.94 mils, the term, since it was extended, is not the normal 10, it was 15 years for us. We still have 10 years left in that term, and if we looked at what the value of that 0.94 is, again, when you make those normal deductions, we think that would net us about $1,561,000. These are some of the big ticket items that we're looking at doing if we can. Our Slidell branch is in great need of more parking spaces. It's our busiest branch. It does about 1/3 of our business. There's a piece of property adjacent to the current library parking lot that's is not developed. We'd like to acquire that property to expand parking. In fact, if we're going to ever do anything to maybe improve that building in the future, like possibly expanding it, because the parking is so critical, I don't know that we could do that without increasing parking first. Also, we do have probably enough revenue to get another rented facility in South Slidell, where we lost the Pontchartrain branch after Katrina. But in reality, that was a double hit for us because it was bigger than most of our smaller branches were, and it also had a meeting room, which is very important for library programming. And most of our assets in the west are larger than the ones in the east, so when we lost this, it impacted us greatly. If we were able to actually buy a facility in South Slidell, I would much rather own it than having to rent it. If we were able to get capital money to donate to this project, in reality, you know, we wouldn't actually be paying for it. Like I said in prior, we've been in buildings for a very long time. I figured at some point we bought it but didn't have the title to some of those rented facilities. We estimate that a building would cost us about $1 million, and that it would be about $500,000 for furniture, fixtures, and equipment. If we were able to have that larger facility in South Slidell, it would be a full-service facility, meaning that it would have extended hours and weekend hours. Some of our smaller facilities just can't really accommodate that because sometimes you have an overlap of staff and they're standing on top of each other, and that you know, doesn't work in those 1,500 square foot branches. Madisonville, we are covering about $400,000 in bond in our regular operational budget. If we were able to shift that to the capital money, that would create enough money for us to staff and to have a bigger branch in South Slidell and staff it and have more materials in a bigger place. These are the three, in our mind, most immediate projects that we would like to take advantage of. We have other needs in some of the other branches. Our Covenant branch is about 25 years old. It probably is going to have an HVAC replacement sometime in the near future. It has some structural problems with the roof and the exterior of the building, and we have original carpeting in that building from 27 years ago. That's something that we need to renovate, and we estimate that cost would be about $1 million as well. Mandeville is one of our branches that we've had about 40 years. It was originally a small pod like we have in Abita and Bush. When it was built, initially it was never big enough, and it's been added on 3 times in its history, and there's still a lot of needs there. It's again, it needs carpeting replaced. The atrium needs to be repaired, and it would be potentially, if we could manage it, a place where we might be able to add on a meeting room and make it more usable for our public. We have a lot of needs for some of the smaller branches. We've done some cosmetic updating of Lee Road and Pearl River, and soon finishing some projects that we have going on at Bush. And in our Beta Spring branch and Bush, you know, they have windows that need to be replaced. There's a whole laundry list of things that we need to do there. Our technical service and maintenance and headquarters are pretty much all in Covington. The Covington branch is very picturesque. It's got all those big trees in front of it. If we could vacate some of those technical services and headquarters functions out of it, I could take 20 cars out of the parking lot. We could use that space more productively for the public. And then we were thinking at some point, since we own some property in Abita Springs, that potentially we could put our headquarters, some of our headquarters functions and technical services functions in maybe a metal building. It would be less costly to build something like that, as opposed to trying to add on to the existing Covington branch and threaten those trees. Because if we ever did that, I'm sure I'd be hung under one of them. But anyway, just looking at some of the things that we have to deal with. A lot of our branches have original furniture and stuff. That stuff, even though it's been pretty durable, it wears out. And we have some cost estimates as to what just doing some of those jobs would be. If you looked at these projects over a period of time, that would yield us about $15 million. And if you turn to page 8, we kind of break them out for you. Again, right now, maximum allowable is 6.29 mils. The amount the library currently receives is 5.35. Potentially, we could get another 0.94 if we rolled up. The gross value of a mill, as we figure, based on what the assessor tells us, is about $1,748,000. 94% of 1 mil for us would be about $1,643,000. If you factor out what has to be deducted legally from that, the net we figure would be about $1.5 million. That would be about $15 million for us over the period of time. It would roll our per capita cost up about $6 per person. That's the standard that the state library uses when measuring how libraries rank next to one another. And if you would look at the various projects, we sort of have it broken down for you, what we think it cost. From our recent experience, whatever we think it costs, it usually costs more. And so we also know over a 10-year period that there'll be other things that'll happen that we can't possibly anticipate. So, you know, we're sure that those revenues would be used. What I have provided for you, and just sort of as kind of a benchmark of how do we look as a library system compared to other parishes that have over 200,000 people. On page 9, if you turn it sideways, you can see our population vis-a-vis our sister parish, Lafayette and Caddo. Our populations are roughly the same. And just to kind of give you a feel of this, how we have difficulty with small branches. I mean, we're a lot smaller than Lafayette, which actually is in a building program now. They have some smaller branches, which I did not list because I know when they build the East and West regionals that some of those will go away, so I didn't want to overstate that. Caddo is more like us in the sense that it's also a large geographical area. It covers obviously Shreveport, but they have a lot of other small towns. But by library standards, you can see that we're much smaller than some of our peers, and that's why when you go to our branches, they're kind of tight and, you know, and packed. And I will say to you that our funding is sufficient to have all the staff that we need, to have all the materials that we would want in all the formats that we offer. The thing that really hurts us is the fact that some of our facilities are too small, and that, you know, what we could potentially get would help us with some of those capital needs. If you want to see how we rank And this is from the state library, you know, where our operation of per capita support is. This is the measures that we use. The state average is about $45 per citizen. Shreveport and Lafayette are a little bit more than that. We rank 40th, which is about a third of what the state average is. I only bring this out to just show you that what we're asking for, what we could use, I don't aspire to be the most expensive library system, but this relief would be very helpful to us. I know I've rambled on, but maybe you have some questions for me.
All right, does anybody have any questions of Mr. Westmoreland? Mr. Grover, your light's on first.
Mr. Westmoreland, we had inadvertently had met each other over lunch unknowingly.
Yes.
And we got into talking a little bit. When was the last time your staff received any adjustment in pay?
Well, they do occasionally get raises based on merit, but the last time we have adjusted our scale was in 2007.
And you're asking basically for the cost of a cup of coffee from each household for your pay, about a cup of Starbucks basically. And I can tell you, I use your Lacombe branch and your Mandeville branch extensively. I probably made up the 700 and something books at the end of it. And
Thank you.
this parish, I believe, without question, would support any roll-up you would have for your library system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Stefancic, I believe you were next.
I'll let Jerry go first.
Okay, Jerry, he yields over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Westmoreland, thank you for coming, and
thank you for having me.
really appreciate the packet you put together. I mean, it is it tells a story. It's simple for us to read, and therefore, you know, I can grasp it really quickly. Didn't realize that we were first in per capita income and 40th in spending for our library system, and we're the 5th largest parish in the state.
Yeah, and again, I don't aspire to be the most expensive, because some of these numbers I can't explain why some of them, you know, are real high. I know some of them have very small populations. But I do think that the fact that we're so far from under the state average, if we got a little closer to that, I think that would provide us some needed relief.
Okay. Well, let me just say this. You know, I held off in approaching you, and you and I started talking maybe about 6, 7, 8 months ago about the possibility with South Slidell, and by South Slidell I mean not only the city but a lot unincorporated. Okay, for my colleagues who may not know where the Slidell branch is located, and Mr. Westmoreland says it's the heaviest used, it is to the far north of the city. Okay, but beyond the city, it's to the far north of growth as well. Where our growth has occurred over the last 15 years has been, I'm not saying any to the north of Slidell, there has been some, no question. But when you look at the total completion of Oak Harbor, when you look at, in Councilman Artigue's district, Lakeshore Estates, which is just going to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger, okay? You look at some of the growth that we're going to start to see, I think, in in Councilman Smith's district off of Bayou Liberty Road, and Councilman Artigue as well. In that area, we have a real need down there. But what I'm seeing here is, and I hope my colleagues see the same thing, what I'm seeing as a businessman, a retired businessman, but a businessman, is that you have a consistent need over the next 10 to 15 years for some major capital improvements all over the parish.
We do.
I mean, we've got a beautiful library built in Madisonville. I know that was needed, okay? You mentioned adding parking in North Slidell. we need something in the south. You mentioned we need an expansion in Covington, which would give more parking spaces. That area, I know Mr. Sharp's here from Covington, is growing, okay? We've got a heavy growth parish. And it seems to me, and I'll agree with Mr. Groby, but I'm looking at it also not only that we have a great library system.
Thank you.
But with the growth we're going to be seeing in the next 10 to 15 years, if we don't act in some way, that growth is going to just overtake us, okay? Because if we don't provide some funding to take care of, and I mean, I'm looking at a lot of comments that are made about roofs need to be replaced, HVAC needs to be upgraded, it's 27 years old. Carpets, what was the HVAC? 27 also?
They were original to the building.
And the carpet's 27, as Mr. Artigue said, you know, years old. Getting more space in Covington and more parking spaces would mean another building in Abita, but you already own that land. So, and it doesn't appear that over the last 7 years, according to the question you just answered to Mr. Groby, that you've been overspending on salaries in the last 7 years. That's an accurate statement?
We're adequately paid, but I wouldn't say that they wouldn't, you know, they would all agree with that statement.
Okay. Well, at any rate, I guess what I'm saying is based upon the booklet you put together, and I have to tell you, I think it's a really good, concise, simple, easy to read, understand booklet. I see a need, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Stefanczyk, your light's still on?
Yes. Donald, I've worked with the library system for a lot of years, and the library system has grown quite a bit in this parish. I know they've maintained a very low millage and been able to, you know, produce a lot of stuff. But I guess when I look at it, and I realize we're trying to work something. I met with Jerry and Pat, you know, we're looking at something in the South Slidell area, but my concern is, one of the things that I look at is the new University Square, and I didn't see anything in this presentation about the possibility of some kind of a library system being considered up there, not in the next 2 or 3 years, but certainly in 5 to 10 years. So I'm wondering if you develop a strategic plan, I'd want to see that there. I think that if we bring the colleges here, the ideal place for a library is right in the middle of where those colleges are all teaching. And so I would think that that would be something that you would want to look at. And
I agree.
And it's something that's going to be needed very quick-like from a standpoint. So I would hope that we would look along those lines as well. And it has to be something that's very modern and very, you know, it has all the new technology and everything else. If the people are going to college, taking college classes, they're going to be up to speed on what's going on in the, you know, in the technology world. So I would want to see that somewhere. I didn't see it in this plan anywhere. So I would want to see it somewhere in the future when you come back before this body. I would hope that that would be included. I don't know when. You know, you can look at it and get with our parish president or Trilby or somebody to understand the growth that is going on up there and when it goes in, and then be able to say, okay, we're going to come up here and look at something we can do in this arena. And I would hope that if you do it soon enough, you might be able to get some portion of the land donated. I don't know whether that's capable or not, but we certainly can work with the people that are doing that land up there, or with the layout of it, and see where that would fit. So
we always do look for the opportunities of partnership. We had some of that with Madisonville, so any kind of thing like that we would definitely be open to, and we want to be part of things like that.
Well, at least up there you wouldn't have to build it up on stilts like you did in Madisonville. So
it's true.
Mr. Smith.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Westmoreland, for a very well-prepared package. As I followed your lead in outlining some of the components of your operations, there were a couple of questions that came to mind, and one of them on page 8, where you referenced the cost of rolling up per capita of $6. Now, is that per person in the parish, or is that per household?
That would be per person. If you took the gross amount and divided it by the population number, I believe, of 2010.
So all men, women, and children. So it's per person in the
Yes, sir.
parish.
That's the standard that we're most comfortable with or familiar with, because we look to our state library for guidance, and that's how we kind of compare apples to apples.
So if I were to look at that from a per household comparison, then it would be substantially higher, of course.
It could be, yes.
Right.
Mr. Smith, can I help you with that?
Sure thing.
Because I did the calculation based on my millage. I live in this district in Madisonville in District 4. And it would, to use Mr. Groby's analogy, it would result for a renter that's not subject to the homestead exemption, it will actually calculate to 14.1 Starbucks. It'll be a net increase of $42.30 for a renter that's not subject to the homestead exemption. In my case, I'm blessed by the circumstance of having a homestead exemption. It would increase my property tax bill by $21.15.
Very interesting, and I appreciate that observation for those of us who can afford Starbucks, okay? But, the other thing, I think that your package, I didn't see it, maybe I missed it somewhere. Is there information here that provides us with the number of total employees at the library?
The library has about 135 employees, 45 of those which are part-time. So I equate to maybe about 120 FTEs.
And of your budget, your total operating budget, what percentage of your budget is
for
salaries and benefits?
Staff and benefits,
yes.
About 55%.
55%, okay. And is that in keeping with industry standards as you follow?
As generally speaking, and talking just from the history, I initially started work in Jefferson Parish Library. At that time, almost 15 years ago when I left, 16 years ago, it ran anywhere from 60 to 75%. That's probably the norm, about 60% for a library when it gets to a certain size. For me, that's kind of a benchmark, so if we stay under that, I feel pretty good about that.
And in the beginning of your presentation, you listed, your bottom line as it relates to some previous years' balance sheet numbers, and looks like that you always came out in the black.
We're very conservative.
Very thin margin, as I appreciate.
Yes, sir. Usually, we don't spend everything that we allocate for expenditure. We usually traditionally come out with about $200,000 if we don't have a big project such as we do this year with Slidell.
Right, and as I appreciated that part of your budget balance sheet, and I also appreciate the capital improvements that you direly need to make, and agree with that wholeheartedly, because it looks like you have some lifetime expectancy issue here that are caught up with you. So you got to pay for that somewhere. But my question is, do you have a reserve that you budget for in your operating budget?
It's just that savings
to handle those types of expenditures.
Because we don't have capital money, we have to rely on that savings. And it's just been the tradition for us, and it goes back way before me, that usually we have savings that would probably operate us for about 6 months. About $5 million off a $9 million budget would be about that. And that's to cover the unexpected, as well. But at some point, and it certainly was with Madisonville, we felt that, since we built the last building, we added 100,000 people, and that was an opportunity to build something substantial that we desperately needed. We could use it everywhere, of course, but you're right.
And so you don't really budget for, I have a line item for a reserve fund in
Well, other than knowing that we'd have to rededicate savings, no. So that's why if we're able to take this .94 and put it toward capital projects, we'll at least build that wall. And in our mind, these capital projects could fall over 2 or 3 years where everything with the operational budget is pretty much for that year.
And the library is a critically significant player in our community.
Thank you.
And no one would argue against that, and I think the library system and board in St. Tammany has done an excellent job. And I'm sure that many people, and you included, probably can tell by some of my questions that I have a tendency to be the voice of less spending.
I understand
when it comes down to public funds, and so I'm always looking for ways that if it's not absolutely necessary, that we can avoid passing more expenses down upon our taxpayers in the parish. But once again, you've made a pretty excellent, pretty good argument for why you need these capital improvements. But there are some that I think we may have some more discussion on. I'd like to have some more discussion about later on. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I think I saw Mr. Stefanski.
Yeah, I just want to make one last comment on this, and that is, Donald, and for all the councilmen up here, our parish used to have 2 millages for the library, one for capital improvements.
Yes, sir.
And one for operational. And this,
yes, sir.
They're working off of right now. We paid off all the buildings and all the debt, so once we got the debt paid off, the millage went away for the capital, and nobody considered renewing that to consider newer buildings, and probably would be a very difficult thing. I think they looked at it a few years later to try and go back out, and they decided against that. And that's why under the existing system here, with the millage that they have, it's the operating budget now, they went back out on the ballot and said, can we use part of that for the capital program?
Yes, sir.
And even though there wasn't any increase in millage, it did allow them to start setting a little bit aside for capital improvements, and that's the only way they're going to build or upgrade or replace the stuff that we have today. So I wanted people to be aware that there used to be 2 millages, but one of them was depleted and paid off. So.
That's correct, and that was the tradition that I had experienced when I was in Jefferson Parish. At that time, I think they had 6 for operational and 2 for capital. And through the years, they were able to build a lot of libraries down there, kind of pay as you go. And then when they built the last big one, the East Bank Regional, which had an enormous amount of staff, they transferred a lot of that capital money into operational so they could run it. So that's true. And when I first got here, it was obvious to me back when I came 16 years ago that our buildings are too small. And as you said, those bills were paid off, and we at the time, whatever, there was just not a plan to build anything new, and that's, well, we got a little bit behind.
Mr. Bender, I believe you were the next one.
Thank you. And just to kind of add on to both what Mr. Smith and Mr. Stefanski both indicated, I did a little bit of research knowing that we were going to be having this meeting, looking back on the Secretary of State's website where you can look up past elections and so forth, and actually also confirmed it verbally when they went for their renewal. And I kind of wanted to see, well, what did the citizens think when they were faced with this renewal? They got almost a 60% vote for the renewal for the next 14 or 15 years. I think it was 58 point, well, you might know, Mr. Westmoreland.
I thought it was 62%, but it was in that
62.
in that
Okay.
neighborhood.
I'm corrected, but I thought I saw 60 or somewhere in that neighborhood. That's pretty substantial. I mean, that shows me, as what Mr. Smith said, you know, it's an integral part. I agree with Mr. Stefancic saying, which is, I see a lot of capital needs. The fact that, depending on what the library board does, the most that you can go up is less than $1 million, and that virtually all of it would be for capital.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what interests me. Okay, to be able to have, kind of like Mr. Stefancic said, we used to have kind of a dedicated for operations and a dedicated continuing capital projects. The other thing, and I'll end with this, that I like on page 8 is seeing money put aside by you and your team. In addition, based on community needs, $2,500,000. I'm reading that to mean in addition based upon the future needs of our community, not specifically known at this moment. And Mr. Stefancic pointed out one, the college campus facility. You also have a contingency, which you don't have now, that Mr. Smith pointed out, which it would be almost $1.5 million of this money. So I like the fact that all areas of the parish with this capital money would be included in renovations, necessary roofing, carpeting, HVAC, expansion, parking, etc. I also like the fact that we're going to have, if you go forth with this and we approve it, almost $4 million of that money sitting there ready for where's the growth going to be? Where do we need more projects, okay? So I think that part of it is well planned out. I agree that you should include in the next presentation the college facility, but I like that we've got $4 million not dedicated.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to break my personal rule and make a personal comment here. You know, Robert's Rules of Order discourages the chairman of bodies from entering into debate, and this is not really a debate. This is a public hearing. So I'm going to by extension, in fact, our Home Rule Charter allows, in fact, demands that the chairman of the council vote on all issues because he represents a district. So unlike Robert's Rules of Order, which discourages the chairman from voting, we are specifically required to vote. So I normally do not engage in debate because I want to be impartial in calling on people and making sure everyone's voices are heard. But in this case, I'm going to make an exception, and I'm going to take that exception from the exception that's provided in the Home Rule Charter. By virtue of the fact that I can vote, I'm going to speak. So but this is not a debate. This is just a hearing, and I want you guys to understand my feelings on this. It's very hard for me to talk about the library because how can you talk against the library? You know, it's apple pie and, you know, Chevrolet. I mean, it's something we all love. I can tell you, if my wife gets word of the comments I'm about to make, she's probably your second biggest supporter behind Mr. Groby here. And I respect all of that. I mean, the libraries have been good to me. They've been good to all of us. It's part of the American fabric. The problem is in this parish, I pay at my house 143 mills. It really irritates me when I hear people come to a public body and say that it's only going to cost $6, you know, in an increase in taxes. When by the time it filters down, we're going to be adding one more mill to 143 for me. I can tell you in Slidell they pay 178 mills, which translates to a renter, which does not have the benefit of property tax exemption, and to commercial property, it's an effective 215, according to Troy Dugas, 215 mills in Slidell. That's why it is hard to operate a business in Slidell. It's hard to pay the property taxes in Slidell. It's difficult for people in my district, in District 4, just at 143. If I did the same math, that would be an effective rate of 160 or so. We're going to be, this year, we're talking about only the fire district and the library board. I suspect that this will not be the same situation next year. So these things are going to continue to be cumulative. I understand the next highest property tax district is probably Lafayette Parish, which may pay maybe 90 or 100 mills or something like that. I mean, we are way above every other place in this state. And it's these little increments, you know, it's those little bites at the apple. Every time we get another body that comes up here and says, you know, it's only going to be, you know, 3 Starbucks, you know, make it you know, something that has some sort of de minimis impact on you personally. Well, when it affects the numbers of heads that a barber has to trim in order to get their business to pay their property taxes, what we're doing is just pushing back that moment in time when they're able to put money in their own pockets. It's frustrating for me because I see nothing in this report about the impact of technology on the written word. I can tell you, as big a fan as my wife is of the library system, I would bet she's not taken a book home from the library in 5 years. She's got a Kindle, she downloads. You guys are great with that. It would seem to me that rather than continuing to invest in bricks and mortar, heck, I'm an architect, I appreciate your willingness to build the built environment, but we've got to recognize that technology is moving beyond. I mean, we have moved now, I can't tell you the last time I even rented a video anymore. It's all, you know, download. I do Netflix and you know, the streaming technology is just way out there. So from the standpoint of the cumulative effect on property taxes in this parish, and anticipating that next year, as we move closer to that reassessment time, there's going to be more of these bodies that are coming up here, are going to be asking us to roll forward. The lack of technology, and I have to tell you, I'm still frustrated with the cost overruns that were incurred on the Madisonville Library. Some of these things that have been described about some of the, you know, funding adjustments in the operation side had to be sacrificed in order to meet the construction budget and the FF&E at the Madisonville Library. I mean, what was it, Donald? It was originally budgeted at programmed at what was the original program number?
We had originally bonded out about $5 million.
What was the final cost?
And the final cost of the building was about $4.7 million.
But okay, then what was the original estimate of the building itself?
That estimate was $3.5 million.
Yeah, 3.5. So it was a better than $1 million cost overrun. And what happened, you know, it's like anything else. You get you fill the gap with the funds that you've got available, and so some of those items in the presentation took a lick because they had to cover the budget. So, you know, I'm not asking anybody to change anything because I don't want to enter into a debate. I'm just bringing these points up as a point of information. Is there anything further that we need to discuss here tonight? Mr. Bender, I think you were first.
Go ahead, Mr.
I'll yield to Ms. O'Brien.
I will yield to Madam Ms. O'Brien.
You know, Donald, I will say that I went ahead and I called a few people in my district, and I kept on asking them, would y'all be in support of increasing the millage, supporting the roll-up? And I kept on getting a no. I have a very conservative district, so I decided to call some people outside of my district. And I was getting the same answer, and I was kind of surprised. And as a former educator, I have to tell you, I know the importance of books and everything. And a couple of people did mention the same thing that Reed just mentioned about the technology. Now, you have outlined some great information here, and my question to you is, are y'all going to have this information available to the public? Because I'd like to have my constituents see your presentation.
Absolutely.
And where will they be able to find this? Because I think it's important for people to see what you're presenting and really have a great, honest discussion about this, because both things are correct. there is a need, but the point he's making about the taxes is true too. So I would like for my constituents to base their decisions that they make when they talk to me on the realities and having a very honest discussion about this. So where will they be able to find this information?
We will definitely put this on our website, what I presented to you tonight. There's a much broader question here that came up about the future of libraries and technology and all of that. And that's a much more extensive question that, that we are trying to bring to the community all the time. And, but I could bring some more of that discussion too, and we'll make that more available as well.
I would certainly encourage you to have some meetings at some of your branches and invite the community members out there so you can explain your need. And like I said, I think people need to make a decision based on the realities of the information, but y'all are both saying stuff that's correct.
Yes.
Quite honestly.
Yeah. I mean, technology is a case in point. But there's a high percentage of people that don't have devices at home. But there's also a lot of people that could afford to buy devices and computers and stuff that lack the skills, and they come to us as well. So there's a lot of value, I think, that we offer, and we can certainly make that clearer.
Mr. Bender, I think now it's your turn.
Thank you. Well, I want to say this. Since I do live in the city limits of Slidell, and Mr. Falconer correctly pointed out that I pay 170-something mills, okay? That is, in fact, a reality. What I also know is I don't like tax increases, okay? But there are tax increases and there are tax increases. In our country, and I have to start there, we spend so much money on taxes that is wasted. Wasted, 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 and wasted. Okay? And I'm going to give a little dissertation for a moment. I got so tired of watching the federal government in Vegas, okay, with a $2 million, $10 million bill, okay, and, this money over here wasted, and this money over here wasted, and this money over here wasted, etc. I also know from the city council and the parish council, and I think we all know this, our constituents know that we have the #1 public school system in the state. I'll look at this as reality. 8 children, 6 of mine graduated from public high schools. If I lived in Jefferson Parish or Orleans Parish and I had to send my children to private schools, okay, because of the education situation, I would have probably spent another $200,000, which I just don't have, okay? So that's what the St. Tammany Parish public school system did for my family. Now, my children went to grammar school at Our Lady of Lourdes. It was more affordable back then. You got discounts for big family for the church, okay? I pay high millage in Slidell, but I have an excellent police department, just as we have an excellent sheriff's department in St. Tammany Parish. When I look at talking to citizens, and I understand completely what Ms. O'Brien's saying, because when you say the word tax, people are thinking in globo, federal tax, state tax, sales tax, federal excise tax on their automobile tires, okay? Plus all the fees, you know what I mean? This fee and that fee and this fee and that fee. You want to go fishing, you can't even catch a fish for free. So I understand all of that. I just look at it kind of this way. I don't like tax increases. I'm not for tax increases, but I'd sure like to see some tax decreases in the areas where the waste is just so outrageous, okay? But yet we don't see that because this body doesn't have really control over that. I don't see a lot of waste in government in St. Tammany Parish in general. I don't think I see a lot of waste in government, okay? I see a lot of efficiency. So, you know, I'm going to give this a lot of heavy thought. I think Mr. Falconer raised a good point. I also think Mr. Westmoreland raised a good point, and we have to think of it this way too. There are a lot of citizens whose homes are assessed at, let's say, $125,000, okay? That whole household would pay $7.50 based upon not living in the city limits. That's just in the parish. $7.50. That household may not be able to have laptops for all of their kids. I wasn't able to. Still not able to. A $100,000 home, those children, those families, that library is extremely important to those people. People who are out of work and have to make ends meet. Not everybody can afford, you know, DSL or what the hell else do you call it, Reed? You know it better than me. Wi-Fi, right, all of this stuff. So all I'm saying is, I want to go on a record. Yeah, I'm against taxes too. We all are. I think you are, Donald. Absolutely. Say it. Sure. I know you are. Okay.
Ain't at the public trough. I got to be careful how I say that.
Why? But I got to say this. I just don't want to give up the good things that make St. Tammany special to me. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, has anybody got any further comments? Mr. Tanner? Mr. Tanner.
I want to thank Mr. Westmoreland for the presentation that he gave, and I don't want to go into taxes and all that, but I'm going to tell you, I will support raising the millage on this, up your millage by 0.94, because I think libraries and education is the foundation of this country.
Thank you, sir.
Any further comments? All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn. So moved. Mr. Groby, seconded by Ms. O'Brien. All in favor, say aye. Aye.